last time I had the pleasure of speaking with you, Symphony of Saints and Sinners was the new record, volume two, that is. And since then, I don't know, like three Grammy nominations, another album almost done. Not a lot of sleep for you in the last year and a half, huh?
No, not a lot, not a lot. Um, after Symphony Sinners and Saints, I was blessed to the next album got the actual Grammy win, and from there life took off even more, so to speak. And we're blessed this year with three nominations, and we're hoping we can bring home at least one more. Let's go.
Those three nominations, while Seven Seas is supposed to come out sometime this year.
Yeah, seventh season comes out in late August of 2025, so got a lot to prepare for it.
Absolutely. So in your case, what is the routine like in terms of creating? Because sometimes it's your album, sometimes it's a one-off, sometimes it's a collaboration kind of deal. Do you treat music like a 9 to 5?
I wish it was a 9 to 5, right? Music is genuinely 16 hours a day or more, and you don't realize it because you love it so much. But every project's different. I mean, if I'm feeling the vibe for something, for myself, obviously I start composing around that. Sometimes I'm just inspired, and other times, especially when I'm producing, that's the thing I love about producing is someone will bring me their music,
Hmm.
very brief version of it, crude version of it, or something they really feel like it's done. I get to write again, and I get to add to all of the things that I feel like will make it shine. And so, and then again, just like as if it's your own album, when you produce, you you're able to get down to that final mix and create all that final sparkle, and so the collaboration, I think, is what's even better, when it's someone else's album, because they appreciate what you've done. You have this teamwork, and it's not just you; it's a group of people. So it's been a fun
When
time.
when I think about all the collaborations, I don't think there's a lot of people who've worked with Kristen Chenoweth and Nita Strauss. In other words, you get the classical, the Broadway, the shredders, etc. Now, your earliest days in music, I know about the Tulsa and the Oklahoma City stuff, which I do want to ask a bit about. But did you start off primarily as an electronic guy that got into orchestration, or are you a metal guy that became an electronic guy that became a classical guy? What was the journey on that?
Yeah, exactly. I was a cover band guy who enjoyed everything from pop to rock to hard rock, and hard rock is what really drew me. And through time, electronic really took over because I'd heard Tommy Lee with his his compilations, and I just fell in love with rock and electronica. And when I started doing that in clubs, and then for some licensing stuff, people started asking for orchestral elements. And heck, I started out in marching band, concert band, so it wasn't that big of a stretch. But somehow, some way, I was able to marry rock with orchestra, and it paid off huge dividends for me. And now I'm blessed to have all these legends approach me and say, "Hey, when can you do a song for me?" I mean, I would never dreamt that the script would flip, but then somehow I also got known for orchestra only, working with everyone from London Symphony to Royal Philharmonic, Macedonia, Czech Republic, whoever. And so I never dreamt any of that would lead to where we're at. But I've noticed a lot of my orchestral friends, they pull me aside and they love the heavy metal. So they're always asking, "Hey, can I be on any of your hard rock materials?" So we're only separated by about 1 degree. There's only 12 notes.
In terms of the hard rock meets the classical, where did that start for you? Did it start with TSO? Did it start with watching Yngwie performing with that Japanese orchestra and making a fool of himself in that way? How far back does it go?
I think it almost, some of it's a culmination of things. Like I said, Tommy Lee came out with his I'm just drawing a blank, Method
Are
of
you talking
Madness.
about Methods of Mayhem or
Methods of Mayhem. When
yeah?
I heard that first tune from them, I was like, "Oh, this is cool as far as electronic and rock." And then at the same time, TSO, just the whole epic nature of it. And then there was
Hmm.
some soundtracks that were coming out that way. And the more I heard it, the more I was drawn to it. And I did have a philosophy, and we may talk about this before, but music in a movie pulls out so much drama and emotion. You know, I always talk
Hmm.
about Rocky's not Rocky without that theme song. Star Wars, The Godfather, the music. Sometimes we remember the theme music more than we do the movie.
For
And
sure.
but when you're at a sporting event and they want you to get out of your seat, what do? They play, you know, everything from Ozzy to, you know, Motley Crue to, you know, Guns N' Roses. You get out of your seat. So you have these massive emotional genres of music. So why not put them together? And what I noticed again was all my hard rock musicians were finally going, "Oh, I love this orchestral stuff." And orchestral people are like, "Oh my God, I love the rock." So I don't know how well I'm answering your question, but it just two worlds collided, and it has been a huge blessing.
You answered that in a great way without sliding Ingve's performance with that Japanese orchestra or Dave Mustaine's one with the orchestra. But you
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
back
San Francisco. Yeah.
But back to you and all this. I've had the pleasure of going to both Oklahoma City and Tulsa on kind of sponsored press trips where they show you the best of the best. And the more questions I ask, the more I find out how many legendary musicians are from these cities, but the average person doesn't realize it. Like the Gap Band is from there. What? Uh, You know, you don't quite think about that, or
Russell.
Leon Russell and his record label being from out there, or etc. Now, when you were growing up in Oklahoma, were there artists that you were able to look at and go, "Oh, they made it, so I can make it too"?
You know, we were inundated with lots of country. Um, and
Hmm.
but what inspired me is, again, I liked all these kinds of music, and I watched some of the local bands started that were involved in rock. I watched them start to really develop, and I think Oklahoma does a great job of propping up our musicians. So as you get, it may not have been the famous people, but as I saw local talent start to really rise to the top, getting notoriety in Oklahoma, that inspired me. And then I would watch my friends leave Oklahoma and just go, I'm going to go make it. And, you know, Greg Upchurch goes out to LA and he's, you know, three doors down and Puddle of Mutt.
Hmm.
And another friend of mine goes out and he's in, you know, Alice in Chains. And so when you see that happen, you've got an opportunity. It's just, do you want to go take it?
Oh, which friend from Alice in Chains is that? William or
That
Jerry?
would be Jerry Cantrell. Jerry Cantrell. He probably
Yeah,
doesn't
not
remember me
every
always begging, "Hey, can we open up for you guys?"
Never say never. They do sometimes have some non-hard rock opening acts, but anyway, this is not the Jerry Cantrell show. It's the Kitt Wakeley show. And so going down the credits and all that, I really do see a who's who of different genres. But is there somebody that you're still hoping that you'll work with? Is that Jerry Cantrell, for example?
There's so many you want to work with just because of what they bring to the table and create, you know, this magic that can happen at any point. Um, but if anybody's specific, it's always the legends, you know. I'm disappointed that I never got to sit in the studio with Quincy Jones, and we were always 1 degree separated. And I don't know how many times I was invited to do something, to attend an event or a meal, or to go to Quincy's house for, they call it popsicles with Quincy. And I'm really disappointed. So sometimes it's the producers I want to work with more than the musicians.
Mhm.
But hey, Paul McCartney and Nikki Sixx, broad range, but yeah, I think both of those would be a lot of fun.
One guitar in your background stands out from all the others, and that is the one with the stripes on it.
Yeah.
So you said before it started with hard rock for you. So Van Halen, I'm assuming, was one of the core bands before Tommy Lee caught you into the
Oh my
electro hard
gosh,
rock.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, just before 1984 album by Van Halen, I was already just digging that stuff. A friend of mine had this massive, you know, stereo, and he was always playing this band, Van Halen. I thought it was awesome. And then they came out with 1984 that kind of dipped their toes in both pop and rock and brought
Hmm.
out that 80s vibe that we all kind of fell in love with for several years. So yeah.
Did you then follow into Eat 'em and Smile, the David Lee Roth solo stuff, or are you stuck with Van Halen?
I did, because he was playing for all the things we can say about different musicians, good or bad. The one thing that
Yeah.
David did is we put together viciously good bands. I mean, Steve Vai and those guys. He was David. I think people underestimate the fact that David was a little ahead of his time for progressive rock and really doing some magical things, and a massive talent. So yes, I followed Eat 'em and Smile, even with some of the gimmicky things that we may have experienced.
It's funny you use the prog word because I think it was Chris Jericho who said to me in an interview that Eat 'em and Smile is a party prog rock album.
I'll have to agree with that. I'll have to agree. I can't disagree.
But in terms of that original band, which had Vi and Billy Sheehan, did you ever work with Greg Bissonette on anything?
No, wouldn't that be a good one? Yeah.
Got it. So these days, when you are recording, is it most of it in your home studio, or do you just go to wherever it is?
Yeah, I compose here in Oklahoma, but then when it's time to work on the album, I'm either in London, LA, New York, sometimes Dallas. Just depends, where my resources are needed and what's available to me at that particular studio. So don't get to do a lot in Oklahoma, but I'm hoping to change that with some opportunities over the next year or two.
Interesting. Are you based in Tulsa these days?
I'm actually based in Oklahoma City, just outside of Oklahoma City, Edmond, Oklahoma.
Any Flaming Lips run-ins out there?
Well, yeah, I'm very good friends with Scott Booker, their manager. Of course, it's not unusual to run into Wayne or some of the guys, and in fact, Derek. Yeah, it's there's some proximity there.
Without sounding like a stalker, this is something that somebody sent me. So I'm not the original source of this. Did you ever look up Wayne Coyne's house on Google Maps and see what comes up?
I know where he lives. I don't know whether I looked it up.
We're, we're not saying what street he lives on.
Yeah, I think it was Scott that said, "Hey, there's where Wayne lives." I'm like, okay.
That's not where I'm going with that. If somebody tries to look him up, he knew that the Google truck was going through town taking the photos. So he's in his bathtub and the front lawn.
No, I didn't know that. How did that escape me? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not encouraging people to go to his place. I'm encouraging to appreciate that Wayne is always a step ahead. And so where I'm going with all this Oklahoma stuff is there's so much going on between the artists that we've spoken about, the rock festivals like Rocklahoma, which keeps growing, etc., that if you go back 20 years, you had to be a New York person, an LA person, or a Nashville person to make it. Nowadays, you're in Oklahoma, you're doing just fine. When did you kind of realize that that was going to be the case, that you didn't have to really uproot?
I think the success of my first big orchestral rock album, which was Midnight Macedonia, I just saw that. I remember playing, I don't know, 2 or 3 thousand people here in Oklahoma, and it was just such a magical night.
Hmm.
Uh, and then that gave me the courage to do Symphony of Sinners and Saints with the London Symphony, um, and then when you start having people from around the country say you should submit this for a Grammy, or just they you see the streams live, whatever it might be, people just come to your show and you're like, holy crap, I didn't think I could. I'm used to the clubs where we had 2 or 3 people in the audience, which was our girlfriend and a buddy and his beer.
Sure.
When you look up and there's 3,200 people, now that's not an arena, that's not Van Halen crowds, but for me, knowing that I have a very narrow niche of music, 3,200 is significant for me. And so I think it's over time you realize that, and it's a drug. So now you really want to create music and what's really going to appeal to those people to get them to come back.
Hmm. Well, I'm going to disagree and say 3,200 is an incredible number of people in a crowd. And the last few times I saw David Lee Roth, there was 1,500 in the
Uh-huh.
audience. So, putting that in perspective right there. So, seeing what's possible with the live symphonic element, do you eventually see yourself trying to do a 20 to 30 kind of city tour along the lines of a, say, a David Foster, where it's where you're going, we're playing the hits and a couple of the vocalists are here?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't thought about 30. What I've really concentrated on for hopefully 2026 is maybe a 10 to 12 city. The shows are very expensive.
Hmm.
So it takes about 2,800 to 3,200 people to pay for the show. We sold out what Carnegie Hall a couple of years
Hmm.
ago. I think I made up off an 8 grand. That's not good. That's not a good ROI. But yeah, I think 10 to 12 cities, something I'm going to do in 2025 with the new album is we're going to try a few immersive forums, venues, where basically the audience is going to be immersed in a 180-degree room and experiencing the music, not just listening to it. And I think if they experience it, it'll touch them a little more. And when they do listen to it later, subconsciously those visuals come back. So I'm really excited about 2025 and the visual venues for the audience to experience that.
So it sounds like a stay tuned on the Grammy nominations, the next record, the touring, etc. So we're just going to have to keep following you. So the last question I have related to all that, we talked about originally at the beginning of the conversation how it's not a 9 to 5 because it's a 9 to 9. You never know when there's inspiration, a last section session, travel, etc. But when you're not dealing with the creative end of your life, what's the number two passion?
Oh, it's my kids and family, and they really are number one and two and three and four and five.
Hmm.
Uh, but I always make sure that, for example, you can't talk to me from 4 to 8 because that's when I go to the gym. That's when I have dinner with the family. That's our one-on-one time. I'm on the road a lot. I joke that my vehicle is parked in Oklahoma. That doesn't mean I'm always here. And so FaceTime and phone calls and bringing them on the road with me. In fact, I'm going to be going to a special. One of my songs is getting ready to be debuted at Carnegie Hall here in about a week, and I'm going to take my daughter on a daddy-daughter 3-day date so she can experience Carnegie Hall that way. So there's a way that you have to carve out family first and make sure that nothing drops off between family and what you love as far as music.
Paltrocast.